atomic era of science and technology began in 1950s. Modern was equated with being comfortable and advanced. Following the end of the World War II, a large number of veterans with new jobs began building families and homes. American consumers purchased products that were unavailable during the war as industries grew. The United States became the world's top industrial power in the years following the World War II. Americans in the post-war era had more disposable cash than ever before because generous government assistance for house loans and schooling. The large number of children born after the World War II, known as the baby boomers, matured into teens and young adults in 1950s and 1960s. The baby boomers were the largest generation in American history at the time, and as such, their sheer numbers had a huge impact on the popular culture. The baby boomers were recognized as a target demographic by astute marketers in the 1940s, and products and entertainment tailored to their needs and interests began to be promoted. Compared to the other generations, the baby boomers gained a stronger sense of generational consciousness. They made repeated attempts to clarify and redefine their identities. The popular music of the time, particularly rock and roll, represented their willingness to defy authority from adults. Other manifestations of the 1950s popular culture, such as cinema and television, aimed to amuse while promoting ideas like religious piety, patriotism, and social conventional compliance. With several breakthroughs like the transistor and color television, technology grew during the 1950s. The switch from radio to television was amongst the most well-liked technical development. Radio used to be the primary source of news and entertainment for the Americans in prior decades. TVs were a luxury item kept in the houses of the wealthy in America. By the end of the 1950s, more than 50% of the Americans owned a television because of technological advancement that reduced the cost of television sets. The transistor was one of the most important technological developments of the decade. Due to its adaptability, this product's development gave rise to a highly lucrative sector. Other innovations like the transistor radio, transistor televisions, computers, watches, and hearing aids were made possible by the transistor. The advancement of technology affected practically every element of the American society. Inventions of all sizes transformed how Americans lived through the 1950s. Young love and freedom from the oppression of the middle-class society were among the themes that rock and roll music championed. In the 1950s, it gained popularity among the American teenagers swiftly, partly due to disc jockey Alan Freed's efforts. In Cleveland, where he also hosted the first rock and roll performance, and subsequently in New York, Freed gave the genre its name and made it more widely known by playing it on the radio. Teenagers were drawn to the rock and roll's lyrics themes of the disobedience to authority. The song Rock Around the Clock by the rock band Bill Haley and His Comets, which was featured in the 1955 film Blackboard Jungle about a white teacher at a troubled inner-city high school, seemed to be calling for teenagers to declare their independence from adult control. In 1956, rock and roll made up more than 68% of the music broadcast on the radio, presumably in spite of the adults' disdain of the genre. The Cold War's beginning, the post-World War II boom, and the American Civil Rights Movement all occurred in the 1950s. In 1945, former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill declared, "America at this moment stands at the summit of the world." In the 1950s, it was simple to understand what Churchill meant. The world's leading military force was the United States. Its economy was growing. More people than ever before could afford the benefits of this affluence, including new vehicles, suburban homes, and other consumer items. The 1950s, however, were also a time of intense turmoil. For instance, the Korean War highlighted underlying differences in the American society, as did the embryonic civil rights movement and the fight against communism at home and abroad. In the 1950s, an increasing number of the Americans voiced their opposition to injustice and inequality. African Americans had been battling racial prejudice for generations, but in the 1950s, the fight against racism and segregation became a major issue in the American society. For instance, the Supreme Court's decision in the historic 1954 case of the Brown v. Board of Education that separate educational facilities for black students were inherently unequal was the first to put an end to Jim Crow. The Brown ruling was challenged by many Southern whites. They pulled their kids out of the public schools and put them in all-white segregation academies, and they used violence and intimidation to keep black people from standing up for their rights. More than 100 Southern legislators even signed the Southern Manifesto in 1956, promising to do all in their power to uphold segregation. Another defining element of the 1950s was the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, sometimes known as the Cold War. After the World War II, Western leaders started to worry that the USSR had expansive tendencies. As one American diplomat put it, in addition, they thought that the spread of the communism anywhere posed a threat to democracy and capitalism globally. Therefore, communism had to be contained through diplomacy, threats, or use of force. The American military entered the Korean War in July 1950 as a result of this doctrine. Around 75,000 soldiers from the North Korean People's Army crossed the 38th parallel, which separates the pro-Western Republic of Korea from the Soviet-backed Democratic People's Republic of Korea a month earlier. Fighting on behalf of the Republic of Korea was seen by the American leaders as resistance to the forces of global communism. By the 1950s, the majority of the families could afford televisions, and by 1950, 4.4 million households in the United States had one. Family-friendly television programs like I Love Lucy, The Honeymooners, The Twilight Zone, and Leave It to Beavers helped define the golden age of television. The box office at the cinema theaters was dominated by stars like John Wayne, James Stewart, Charlton Heston, Marlon Brando, Grace Kelly, Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin, Elizabeth Taylor, and Marilyn Monroe. Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning's abstract expressionism heralded a new era in art, opening the door for Andy Warhol's pop art in 1960s. In the United States, a general sense of stability, satisfaction, and agreement was aided by the blossoming affluence of the 1950s. However, that agreement was flimsy, and the turbulent 1960s caused it to disintegrate permanently. The conservative ideology that supported the nuclear family and conventional gender roles flourished in the American society throughout this decade, at least publicly. However, as societal expectations grew, dissent became obvious. Hollywood frequently utilized the fear of communism, which the Red Scare helped propagate, to reject performers who held differing political beliefs. Critics of the American culture also took on various forms, including environmentalists, feminists, and African American activists. Significant activist movements would emerge in the 1960s as a result of the rebellious culture of the 1950s. The family was a priority in the 1950s American society. Children and marriage was on the national agenda. Additionally, the American family served as the focal point of the Cold War's cultural front. Propaganda of the period promoted the notion that Americans were superior to communists because of the nuclear family. American propaganda highlighted the atrocities of the communism in Russian women's lives. They were shown working in drab industries while wearing gunny sacks, leaving their kids in cold, anonymous daycare centers. An image of the American women, with their feminine hairstyles and delicate dresses, tending to the hearth and home while enjoying the benefits of capitalism, democracy, and freedom, was promoted in contrast to the evils of communism. Women in the 1950s experienced intense cultural pressure to concentrate their goals on a wedding ring. Couples were getting married, on average younger than ever before, and the US marriage rate was at all-time high. It was common for people to get married shortly after high school or throughout their time in college. It was a prevalent misconception that women attended college in order to obtain a Mrs. degree, pronounced MRS. Despite the fact that women had other goals in life, the prevalent narrative at the time espoused by the society and media was that a marriage was much more crucial for a young lady than a college education. Even though women's employment rates increased during their time, the media tended to emphasize women's place in the home. If a woman was not engaged or married by the time she was in her early 20s, she ran the risk of becoming an old maid. This was what life was like in the 1950s in America. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you on the next video.